Thank you very much, Mr. D. Suresh Kumar, for joining the lead on a pretty momentous day. I mean, for the first time, we have a name associated with the AIADMK, which is not Jayalalitha,
Yes,
which
that's
we
true.
have been used to for so many years now. And Edappadi Pழனிசாமி has been officially announced as the chief ministerial candidate for the party this morning. So, Mr. Suresh Kumar, you're a keen political watcher. You've been observing politics in Tamil Nadu for so many, many years. My first question to you is, from a political almost non-entity, Edappadi Pழனிசாமி has today been announced as a chief ministerial candidate for the second time, and this is after an accidental swearing in as the chief minister of the state. So, how do you see the rise or the emergence of Edappadi Pழனிசாமி? How has he managed to do this entire makeover?
I think this political journey is something really amazing because if you notice, as you mentioned, became chief minister by accident after Sashikala was sentenced to undergo 4 years imprisonment in jail. And if you just look back, at the moment when he was announced as chief minister in that February 2017 at Kuwatu, the way he prostrated before Sashikala, it really looked like, Sashikala will be holding the remote control to this government. But surprisingly, within no time, although initially Mr. Pழனிசாமி did appear to be a disciple of Sashikala, I think he has been very shrewd enough to quietly sideline not only Sashikala but also TTV Dinakaran and the rest of the family over the few last 3.5 years, and also assert himself as the chief minister of Tamil Nadu. And the way he has done it is amazing. If you notice it, immediately after he took over as chief minister, TTV Dinakaran threw in his hat in the RK Nagar assembly constituency where he wanted to contest. So I think perhaps at that point, Mr. Pழனிசாமி realized that if Dinakaran is going to win, then he may just be warming the chief minister's seat for him to occupy. And that's when he did something that was unthinkable. He managed to consolidate the entire cabinet under him, won their confidence, and got them to announce that we will stay away from the Sashikala family. And in the process, he opened up channels of communication with O. Pannirselvam's faction at that point. And he realized that unity for the AIADMK was very crucial. Winning back the two-leaf symbol was the key to ensuring that the party remained among the largest parties in Tamil Nadu. And in that process, what he did was he dared to get the rebels disqualified, 18 of them who had sided with TTV Dinakaran. And while doing so, if you closely look at his, the way he handled that, he did not cede any ground to O. Pannirselvam either. Because when Mr. Pannirselvam came back, of course, the BJP had a role in the merger of the two AIADMK factions, but Edappadi did not give him any of the plum portfolios that he himself was holding. He gave him a post of deputy chief minister and the finance portfolio, which he was earlier holding under Jayalalitha's cabinet, in Jayalalitha's cabinet, and additionally a housing ministry and a few other ministries. While he kept the entire, PWD and other highway and other departments with himself, including the home ministry, of course. And from there on, he realized, he initially came across as somebody who was not quite confident in public speaking. If you notice the initial meetings that he had as chief minister, public meetings for the MGR centenary, he would be reading out from a prepared text. But over time, I think he gained confidence. He was able to deliver speeches. Of course, there were faux here and there, but still, he came across as a confident person and a practical leader who knows, what will hold him in good stead. So in that pursuit of consolidating his hold on the party, he made compromises during the 2019 elections, if you notice, the parliamentary elections, and along with that, we had the by-elections to 22 assembly constituencies then. He knew that to save his government, the AIADMK cannot go it alone. And while taking the BJP on board was a calculated risk, he went out of the way to accommodate the PMK, which until then criticized the AIADMK, especially Edappadi Pழனிசாமி, at a very, very harsh terms. So forgetting all that, he realized that he had to be flexible to ensure that the PMK backed them to the hilt. And while he conceded 7 seats to the PMK in the parliamentary election, he ensured that all the 22 assembly constituencies, the AIADMK got to contest. And besides, the BJP did try to, perhaps BJP thought that he could be an easy pushover and then sought 8 seats from him. And when that did not happen, he only considered 5. And subsequently, the remaining 3 he gave to the allies, but he ensured that they contested the 2 leaves symbol. And finally, although they badly performed in the Lok Sabha elections, he ensured that he got enough number of assembly seats to keep his government going. And after that, when the by-elections came, subsequent 2 by-elections came, he won hands down. So in that aspect, he consolidated himself. And subsequently, I mean, from the very beginning, if you notice, he never gave the impression that O. Pannirselvam was the leader of the AIADMK. Because post-merger also, he remained the chief minister while Mr. OPS was deputy chief minister, and he agreed to play second fiddle to him in the government. And in the party, Mr. Edappadi Palaniswamy ensured that he was treated as an equal partner to OPS because he was a co-coordinator, not the joint coordinator. So he ensured that while Pannirselvam was the coordinator, he became the co-coordinator, which means both of them will have the powers to authorize a party candidate for elections, which means the Form B, both of them have to sign together. That clearly, ensured that the party was with him. And once this arrangement was worked out, the media's focus was only on what the chief minister will say, not on what the deputy CM says. And every statement comes that is issued by the AIADMK carries the joint signatures of both Mr. Pannirselvam and Mr. Palaniswamy. So it never really gave any upper hand to Mr. Pannirselvam. And after that, if you notice in the last 2 months, after that very infamous August 15th thing when he hoisted the flag for the Independence Day, and then ministers were taking turns to visit his house and the official residence of Mr. Pannirselvam to work out some mediation. At that point also, he remained very firm that he'll be the chief minister candidate. And I don't think anybody was left in doubt. And that he to be the chief minister was proved again during the AIADMK's executive committee meeting that was held last month, where everybody spoke out only in support of him being the chief minister. And the only area of any negotiation where he will give scope was on the steering committee. He did not concede even a single inch of ground from the position of co-coordinator. So even to this day, he is the co-coordinator of the AIADMK. And in the steering committee, I think he was initially very reluctant to offer, this sort of a concession to Mr. Pannirselvam. But when he realized, when he saw reports that Mr. Pannirselvam had secretly opened up channels with the TTV Dinakaran faction for a possible rapprochement on the grounds of the Mukkalatur vote bank, the Devar vote bank, he decided that there's no point in being stubborn and losing out on a crucial unity factor. And therefore, he agreed to constitute a steering committee. And even in the steering committee's composition today, if you see, at least 6 people, all of them cabinet ministers, are his nominees. And the remaining 5 are Mr. Pannirselvam's nominees. And I will not be surprised if Mr. Palaniswamy manages to wean away 1 or 2 members of the Pannirselvam faction to his side. Just as he did, because if you notice, in the initial days, people like veteran leaders like Mr. Semmalai were on Mr. Pannirselvam's side. But during the ongoing controversy, they were nowhere to be seen near Mr. Pannirselvam's house. So it's very clear that he has consolidated himself. And it's in a way good for the party also, because the party could not have gone to the 2021 assembly election showing somebody else, projecting somebody else as the chief minister, because that would mean a lack of confidence in the 3.5 years of government that he has led. And therefore, I think it's good for the AIADMK that they have retained Mr. Palaniswamy as the chief minister candidate.
That's a great point you make, that it's good for the party. And you also made a nice you sort of summed up Edappadi in 2 words. He's a practical politician. And I think that pretty much sums up what this gentleman is. But being a practical politician versus a popular politician versus political pedigree in that sense, how do you see Edappadi Palaniswamy taking on MK Stalin, Kalaignar Karunanidhi's son? How do you see EPS taking him on in the hustings?
Essentially, what has happened is, like I said, the AIADMK has got a leader. Whether the people have decided him as a leader is a big question mark here, right? Because the vacuum was within the AIADMK, who will be the leader. So that has been filled. Now you have to see what happens in the elections. But between Mr. Stalin and Mr. Palnisami, the popular perception is that Mr. Stalin is a more widely acceptable figure than Mr. Palnisami. The reason being that Mr. Stalin has been in politics as Mr. Karnadi's son and being projected as the heir apparent of the DMK for long enough. And he has also held positions such as the Chennai mayor, where he could endear himself to the masses. And he was deputy chief minister. He held the industries portfolio and all those things. And during that process, Mr. Stalin has had a longer, relationship with the people as compared to Mr. Palnisami, because although Mr. Palnisami and Mr. Stalin entered the Tamil Nadu Assembly around the same time in 1989, Mr. Palnisami as Jayalalitha's candidate, the AIADMK JJ faction, and Mr. Stalin on the DMK ticket from Thousand Lights Assembly constituency. But Mr. Palnisami's role in the Tamil Nadu politics was limited in the sense that immediately after he won in 89, then subsequently there was a gap in the sense that he went to the parliament in 1998, and again 99 he lost, right? And by the time he made a mark as a minister, he was known as one among the 5 ministers who were part of Jayalalitha's kitchen cabinet. So he never had any identity for himself. And also the portfolios that he held was such that, there won't be any greater interaction with the people. He held the portfolios of PWD and highways, where the interaction with the public is less compared to a local administration minister or a minister for municipal, for water supplies, or a health minister where or an education minister. So in that sense that, his role was more or less limited. But, now, he has become a well-known figure in Tamil Nadu. I mean, people know that there is somebody called Edappadi Palnisami who was chief minister for 3.5 years. So he will not be a stranger when he goes to meet the electorate. And he led the AIADMK in the 2019 elections. There can be no doubt in it because he campaigned across Tamil Nadu. But in terms of, he will certainly face anti-incumbency. There's no doubt about it. There's that he has to face. And it will also depend on whether he is able to sever the ties between the AIADMK and the BJP, considering that the BJP is currently perceived as being a party that is not very popular in Tamil Nadu. And in that context, whether he is able to distance the AIADMK from the BJP and, go in for a different alliance, that will matter. So Stalin has an advantage because, yes, people there's always this yearning of change, not just because the AIADMK is in power now, but also there's this tiredness factor because the AIADMK has been in power for the last about 9 years now, right? So therefore, the last elections, people did express a desire for change, but the DMK fell short of majority. That was because there was a 3-way contest. Therefore, the DMK has an edge. There's no doubt about it. But I would also say that much would depend on what way, what sort of a lead the DMK would take would depend on the kind of alliances that will be formed in the next 3-4 months, perhaps.
So it's interesting that you're saying that there is anti-incumbency and that gives the DMK an edge. But because I've been speaking to some pollsters today, and some of them are saying that the DMK will sweep the next assembly elections, and others say that the AIADMK still has a fighting chance. Now, would you like to stick your neck out and say what could happen 7 months from now? Of course, 7 months is a long time in politics. So, what would you say about this?
The DMK, if you go by the 2019 parliamentary election result, definitely, they will not go down so drastically, even if they were to suffer any reverses in the next 8 months. It will not be so intense that, the AIADMK will be able to edge out the DMK in the race. Because in 2019, they polled a very fair percentage of votes, right? And if the DMK retains its alliance, I'm sure that they will have an edge. But whether they will sweep is a question mark, because if you notice, just months after the Lok Sabha polls, when the Velur, polls were held, which were deferred earlier, the margin of victory came down to 8,000. And then you just compare it to the, actual Lok Sabha polls, it was something, the victory margin was 3 lakh, 4 lakh in many constituencies, but it came down to 8,000. Of course, I do understand that when there is a concentrated polling in one particular constituency, then a ruling party will always have the advantage of pumping in all its resources, all its ministers in the constituency, focus there, and then, definitely have an edge over the rivals. But the way the victory margin narrowed to this extent to 8,000, it does create some questions on whether the DMK will be able to maintain the same kind of massive leads, right? And also, will have to take into account other factors that might emerge. If you notice, the BJP then and now, after the Lok Sabha polls, after the defeat, they have managed to win over a couple of DMK leaders, unheard of. There have been AIADMK leaders after Jayalalitha's death who have joined the BJP, but the DMK, which was projected by some people to win hands down in the coming elections, members from that party have switched over to the BJP. So I'm not saying that the switching over of VP Doraiswamy to the BJP is going to give them any great strength overnight. But the fact is the BJP has moved away from being an untouchable party, right? It is unpopular, no doubt, but definitely not untouchable. So now you'll have to look at the kind of alliances that are to be formed. If there's going to be a straight contest the way it was in the parliamentary election, then yes, the DMK will have an advantage, right? But if there is going to be a realignment of political forces, we don't know yet whether Rajinikanth is serious about launching his party. But if he does, as promised, then definitely he will have some advantage in the sense that I'm not saying that he's going to be catapulted to the center stage overnight and then become the not like NT Ramarao, definitely not that level. But even if he takes away 8 to 10% votes, you have other players who can easily take 3%, 4% votes. And we are not yet sure about what would happen to the AMMK, whether there will be a separate player or whether there would be possibly a realignment between the AIADMK and the AIADMK. So all that you have to take into account. So, I think it would be a bit early to conclude that, it will be, it's a bit early to conclude that the AIADMK will lose out very badly or that the DMK will get a landslide.
Fair point, and a burning question that everybody has been asking me of late, especially after the RTI application of the RTI response to Sasikala's jail sentence had come out, which shows that she is eligible for parole and quite soon. So how do you see Sasikala's, well, obviously she can't be in active politics, she can't contest an election, but how do you see her affecting Tamil Nadu politics if she comes out quite soon on parole?
I think when Sasikala is released, if she chooses a political role for herself, irrespective of the fact that she may not be able to contest an election for the next 6 years, irrespective of that, I think there may be a churning in the AIADMK even now, because I think Mr. Palaniswamy realized that, and that is why he went for a compromise even now. Because if you notice, in the last 3.5 years, there are very few ministers in this government who have openly criticized Sasikala. Okay, if it's people like Mr. Jaykumar who don't have a constituency beyond Royapuram, right, who have been very vocal in their criticism of Sasikala. But otherwise, there are many ministers who are known to be supporters of Sasikala. In fact, they haven't spoken anything in the AIADMK executive committee meeting, any of the Mukkalatur ministers, from what I understand. I just understand that they just were silent watching what the ministers from the Western Belt were doing. So we have to see what role she plays, and if she comes, will there be moves for a rapprochement between the AMMK and the AIADMK? Because the AMMK has polled about 5% of votes in a parliamentary election, right, contesting on an independent symbol. So will there be any rapprochement? The people might still not accept, people in our sense that, we may say the urban voters may not accept Sasikala. They may not see her as a victim of circumstances as her party would like to project her. But we cannot be sure about how the rural Mukkalatur voters will see this. Perhaps they might have a feeling that she has been victimized, because of her association with Jayalalitha. She went to jail, and nobody has any doubt about the way she took care of Jayalalitha, not only during the hospitalization but even through the thick and thin over the last 20-25 years till Jayalalitha's death. So therefore, she might perhaps have some sympathy among her community members. But it all depends on whether she wants to play a political role.
Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Suresh Kumar. I think things are finally hotting up in our state, and exciting elections are around the corner. So thank you very much for your time and for your knowledge. And we'll keep coming back to you as the elections progress, the run up to the elections progress. So thank you very much.